Senator Brown. It being 2 p.m, we will go to questions without notice, and I call Senator Gallagher.
Oh God, I nearly had a heart.
To the Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Rushton. In question time yesterday, the Minister claimed that, and I quote, "As soon as we became aware that the method of debt collection was not valid, the Morrison government, quote, immediately ceased the robo-debt scheme." When did the government first become aware that the Honourable Scott Morrison's robo-debt scheme was not valid?
The Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Senator Gallagher. I'll have to take on notice the exact dates so that I can give you the exact dates. Well, Senator, I'll take the interjection from Senator Wong. That I do not keep my diary with me. However, I can stand by the comments. You are asking me for a specific date. That date I will take on notice, and I will provide that date to the chamber of the exact date that I became aware that the method by which we were determining debts through the income compliance program was not valid.
Oh, I think Senator Ruston's concluded her answer. Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. And my supplementary is: on what date did the government first seek legal advice? On what date was the government first advised robo-debt was not valid?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, I'm assuming they're two separate questions in relation to legal advice and the date at which we were advised that income compliance and income matching was not a valid means by which, and I will stand by the assurance that I gave to the chamber, and I have taken on notice the exact date, and I will provide that back to the chamber at my soonest convenience. In relation to, well, as soon as I have had the opportunity, Senator Wong, as soon as I have the opportunity to find the exact date. I was not asked yesterday for the exact date. I would also like to put on the record, despite those interjecting opposite, in relation to legal advice, as is the normal practice, Senator Gallagher, the practice that you undertook when you were in government. We do not provide advice in relation to legal advice. It is a long-standing practice of this chamber and the other chamber of successive governments.
Order. Senator Wong on a point of order.
Point of order, direct relevance. The question did not go to the content. It went to the date on which legal advice was sought.
I think the minister has the minister concluded her answer. There was 3 seconds remaining. She has. Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Rushton claims the government was, and I quote, very, very quick and responsive. When the government stubbornly persisted with the program in spite of 76 warnings from the AAT between 2017 and 2019 and losing hundreds of appeals, why should Australians believe this minister?
Senator Ruston.
Well, thank you very much, and I stand by the comments that I made yesterday, Senator Gallagher, and I said I'll provide you with that advice. And once again, I would point out, as I did yesterday, each and every case that goes before the AAT is a unique case. Some of those cases found in one direction, some of the cases found an alternative outcome. So to come in here and suggest that the outcomes of an AAT form the basis of legal advice to government, I think is a misrepresentation of what the AAT process actually does. But as I said yesterday, as soon as the government was aware that income compliance was the program was not collecting or determining its debts on a valid basis, which was income matching, we acted very quickly, and I stand by that. We acted very quickly to cease that program and put in place a program to enable the repayment of those debts.
Order. Before I come to you, Senator Antich, I'd just like to acknowledge in order. Before we move to the next question, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge members of the ADF Parliamentary Exchange Program who are joining us in the Senate gallery today. Welcome to Parliament House, and I hope you find your experience here valuable on behalf of the Senate. Senator Antich.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Can the Minister please update the Senate on how the Morrison government is supporting small and medium businesses to keep apprentices in training through the economic impacts of COVID-19 and how the government is delivering on these commitments to ensure Australia has the skilled workforce it needs to build a stronger and more secure post-pandemic Australia?
The Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Antic for his question. And as Senator Antic knows, the Prime Minister has made it very clear. Australia's economic recovery from COVID-19 will be a skills-led recovery. And that is why, as a government, we have put vocational education and training at the forefront of our economic agenda.
Order.
And in fact, Mr President, this year alone, we will invest almost $7 billion in vocational education and training. That's right, almost $7 billion. Mr President, when COVID-19 first impacted us earlier this year, the government understood that trainees and apprentices, they are the first to go in an economic downturn, and we needed to put in place the policies to ensure that employers, and in particular our small businesses, were able to keep their apprentices and trainees on the job where we need them. And we did this through our Supporting Apprentices and Trainees wage subsidy. It commenced in April this year and it runs through until March next year. And Senator Antic, as at the 27th of November 2020, the wage subsidy has now assisted 56,000 businesses, 98%, Mr President, of which are small businesses in Australia, to keep now over 103,000 apprentices and trainees on the job, and we do this by covering 50% of their wages. Mr President, this now includes over 20,000 bricklayers. They've been kept on the job because of the wage subsidy. 15,000 electricians kept on the job because of the wage subsidy. 10,000 plumbers kept on the job because of the wage subsidy. 5,000 hairdressers, again kept on the job because of the wage subsidy, and 8,000 automotive mechanics and electricians. And for those from rural and regional Australia, over 35,000 of the apprentices and trainees and over 20,500 small and medium businesses have utilised the wage subsidy.
Cash, time for the answers expired. Order. Order. Senator Antic, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, how will the government's Job Trainer Fund build on this success to support out-of-work Australians to undertake training, fill skills shortages and find employment following the economic impacts of COVID-19?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, access to free or low-cost training in areas of skills demand is so important as Australians and our economy recover from the impacts of COVID-19. And that's why, as you know, the government has partnered with the states and territories, all of the states and territories. The Commonwealth Government has put $500 million on the table, and the states and territories have matched this funding with another $500 million, and we have the $1 billion Job Trainer Fund. As you know, all states and territories, in fact now including your home state of Victoria, have signed on to the Job Trainer Fund. The fund itself, once up and running, will provide around over 300,000 additional training places. And in fact, in 6 jurisdictions, Senator Keneally, it is now live. In 6 jurisdictions it's now live with over 263,000 additional training places. They are already available and on the market. Free or low-cost training in areas of actual demand.
Senator Antic, a final supplementary question.
Minister, as we emerge from the economic impacts of COVID-19, how will the government's JobMaker budget build on the record of skills reform and support new apprentices into training?
Senator Cash.
Mr President, as I noted in my first answer, we put in place the Supporting Apprentices and Trainees wage subsidy because we recognise that small businesses in particular, impacted COVID-19, needed assistance to keep the apprentices and trainees they had in training on the job. But we also recognise as a government that we need to assist businesses to bring on new apprentices and trainees to ensure that employers have the pipeline of skilled workers that they need. And that's why we've announced a $1.2 billion boosting apprenticeship commencement subsidy. That, Mr President, will create 100,000 new apprentices and trainees, and what it does is really highlight the importance of skills and training to Australia's economic recovery. The subsidy, again, it's available to employers of any size, in any region, in any location, to sign up a new apprentice or trainee and claim up to 50% of their wages through till the 30th of September next year.
Senator Cash. We are going to Senator Billick remotely. We'll just give it a second to kick in for her to ask her question. Senator Billick.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Cash. The COVID-19 report of the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with a Disability found the Morrison government's failures led to it, and I quote, neglecting to develop policies specifically addressing the needs of people with disability. Why?
There was trouble hearing you there, Senator Billick. If I could ask another Labor senator to read it, that would be handy. Thank you. Senator Wong?
If you don't mind, Senator Billick, we had some difficulty hearing, so I might just repeat it. The COVID-19 report of the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability found the Morrison government's failures led to it, and I quote, neglecting to develop policies specifically addressing the needs of people with disability. Why?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Wong on behalf of Senator Billick for reading out the question. Mr President, as the government has said, we have welcomed the release of the Disability Royal Commission's interim report. We acknowledge that we all have a role to play in stamping out violence, abuse, neglect or exploitation of people with a disability. It is completely unacceptable. We also thank Senator Billick, the Disability Royal Commission, for its important work, and we will carefully consider the findings in relation to COVID-19, as well as other issues and recommendations that emerge as part of this inquiry. The government is committed to ensuring our response to the global pandemic properly takes into account the needs of people with disability, and we will carefully consider all of the recommendations as part of this process. I can also advise that the Australian government will work across relevant portfolios and ministers to respond to the Commission's recommendations as a matter of priority.
Now, I'll go to Senator Billick again and I'll ask the controllers to see if they can max up the volume. Senator Billick.
Thank you. Disability Royal Commission Chair Ronald Sackville was clear in identifying that the federal government was responsible, and I quote, it was the absence of that consultation that led to significant failures in the responses of the Australian government. Why was the Morrison government willing to leave Australians with a disability behind?
Senator Cash.
Well, Senator Billick, I'm going to reject the premise of the way in which you've put the question, and you'd be aware that the government has consulted widely in relation to this. But again, the Australian government, we welcome, Mr President, the interim report of the Disability Royal Commission. And as I've also said, we will now work across portfolios and across ministers to respond to the Commission's recommendations as a matter of priority.
Senator Billick, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The report found the Morrison government failed to provide PPE to people with disability and their support workers, failed to provide access to essential food and medications, and left people with disability feeling forgotten and ignored. Why does the Morrison government keep leaving vulnerable Australians behind?
Senator Cash.
Well, again, Mr President, in relation to the premise of your question, I will again reject it. And as I've said, we have welcomed the interim report of the Disability Royal Commission. And again, as I've already stated, Mr President, one of our most important tasks during the course of COVID-19 has been protecting people with disability. And as we have also stated, we all have a role to play in stamping out violence, abuse, neglect or exploitation of people with disability. The government has acted swiftly and decisively to help protect Australians with disability in response to the evolving impact of COVID-19. And as I've said, we will now work across portfolio and across ministers in relation to the recommendations.
Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Mr President. My question without notice is to the Leader of the Government, Senator Birmingham, representing the Prime Minister. Today, former President of Kiribati, Anote Tong, has written in the Sydney Morning Herald highlighting that climate change remains the single most pressing security threat to their region. He says that without radical action, deadly disasters will become more intense and severe. Kiribati will become uninhabitable, and there will be a wider global apocalyptic disaster. He calls for serious action on climate, including moratoriums on coal and gas. In this piece, Mr. Tong has asked our Prime Minister if he is now willing to listen to his Pacific family and take steps to protect all of us, and said that courage and leadership are what's needed here. Will the Prime Minister have the courage to listen and act on the climate crisis?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President, and I thank Senator Faruqi for her question regarding the media comments of the former Prime Minister of Kiribati. I note the comments. I haven't read the opinion piece in full, but I have heard some commentary in relation to it, and obviously you have quoted from it to a degree, Senator Faruqi. What I would say in that regard is that our government certainly takes our engagement with the Pacific Island family of nations very, very carefully and importantly in terms of the approach we take, including on issues of climate change that we know are of very real and genuine concern to our Pacific Island family. It is why we have taken every possible step to ensure that as a country we, time and time again, when we make commitments in relation to emissions reductions, meet those commitments and exceed those commitments. It's why, unlike some other nations, we haven't sought to outsource activities in relation to the meeting of those commitments either. Indeed, yesterday, I think, when I gave some figures to Senator Waters about Australia's rate of emissions reduction relative to other countries that have not achieved comparable rates, those countries, generally speaking, when it comes to meeting their Kyoto 1 or Kyoto 2 obligations, rely upon international credits purchased elsewhere to be able to offset the emissions within their own country. In Australia, what we have been able to do through our work over many years and through the technological change and investments that have occurred across the Australian economy is to be able to meet and exceed the targets that we have set. And it's through that continued investment in relation to technology that we will continue to be able to meet and exceed our targets, to build upon those targets, but to do so in a way that also protects Australian jobs and indeed job opportunities for the many Pacific Island workers who come and enjoy opportunities in Australia
Senator
too.
Birmingham. Senator Faruqi, a supplementary question.
Minister, in an open letter to the Prime Minister published today, 15 Pacific leaders, including Mr. Tong, described their homelands and cultures as facing certain devastation from climate change. Does the government acknowledge that the worst impacts of climate change are being felt and will continue to be felt in poorer countries, including many in the Pacific region?
Senator Birmingham.
As Mr. President, well, the government does certainly acknowledge the severity that Pacific Islanders see in relation to climate change issues, and it's why we engage very seriously and thoughtfully with them on those issues. It's also why we believe that the first responsibility for a country like Australia in making commitments as we have in relation to emissions reduction is to meet those commitments, indeed to strive to exceed those commitments, and why we are pleased that Australia has consistently done that, unlike some others. We also acknowledge that it is therefore then a global responsibility, that you don't get outcomes in terms of emissions reduction that Pacific Island leaders may wish to see unless other nations also not only make commitments but then also deliver on those commitments. And the delivery is a key part that seems to often be put aside in the virtue signalling aspects of some of this debate. For our government, we see delivery as essential, and that's where our focus is when it comes to emissions reduction.
Senator Faruqi, a final supplementary question.
Minister, amongst the calls in this open letter are for new and additional funding beyond the current aid budget to finance climate mitigation and adaptation under the Paris Agreement, including contributing to the Green Climate Fund. Will the government commit to this? And if not, why not?
Senator Birmingham.
As Mr. President, well, our government has put great priority in terms of delivering specific assistance and support to Pacific Island nations, and we see that as important across a range of different areas of policy import. Climate change, adaptation and resilience is one of those, and we support work with our Pacific Island family in that regard. Equally, we have scaled up support for Pacific Island nations in response to COVID and delivered additional support focused very directly in terms of the Pacific Island countries, and there, in building on that COVID support in a financial sense, has also been our acknowledgement of our responsibility in working with those less developed nations, those smaller micronations within our region, for their access to vaccines and to ensure their safety and their economic well-being. So we take the responsibility in working with those nations across all of those areas and other development considerations very, very seriously.
Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australians, Senator Colbeck. Can the Minister outline how the Australian government has responded to the threat of COVID-19 to senior Australians in aged care?
Order. 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 Senator Wong. Senator Wong, that is not helpful before the ministers started answering a question. Senator Wong, interjections are always disorderly. Before we be disorderly, I'd like to at least hear from the minister. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you to Senator Henderson for your question. Mr President, from the very beginning, responding to the COVID-19 pandemic has been a top priority for this government. We know that our most vulnerable senior Australians were most at risk, and we have acted at every stage to prepare for a worst-case scenario should this virus enter our aged care facilities, Mr President. We closed our borders, Mr President. We planned for an emergency response with our medical professionals. We negotiated hospital agreements. We increased the capacity of our providers, and we resourced a surge workforce for residential aged care. We secured and distributed a substantial national stockpile of PPE, all at a time of global shortage, Mr President. We have invested to date over $1.7 billion to plan, prepare, act and recover, Mr President. There are no countries, Mr President, where there has been widespread community transmission that have been able to avoid outbreaks in residential aged care. Here in Australia, we've seen the devastating loss of 693 Australians, Mr President, in aged care. Our condolences will always be with their friends and families, Mr President. When community outbreaks occurred and COVID-19 hit Victoria and New South Wales, we came together with a collaborative response between federal government agencies, state governments, providers, professionals, families and senior Australians, hospital networks and others to do what we could to manage the outbreaks, to keep it out of the homes of our most vulnerable. As I noted yesterday, Mr President, in our response to the Royal Commission, we've been able to stop the spread of COVID-19 to senior Australians in 97% of our aged care facilities.
Senator Henderson, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. What is the government doing to ensure—
Order. Senator Polley. Senator Polley. I'd like to hear the question, please. Senator Henderson.
Thank you, Mr President. Senator Colbeck, what is the government doing to ensure COVID-19 is kept out of aged care facilities into the future?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. It's very pleasing to note, Mr President, that there have been no cases of residents in aged care since the 28th of October, Mr President. While the rest of the world continues to battle this terrible virus, we mostly have it under control here in Australia and now have the capacity to recover in time and get on the front foot so that we are ready for any future threats. Mr President, the government accepted and is acting on all 6 recommendations from the Royal Commission's special report on COVID-19, and yesterday I announced an additional $132.2 million of measures to help our senior Australians to ensure we are even stronger into the future as we recover. We are committed, Mr President, to strengthening infection prevention control in facilities, including working with state jurisdictions to do so.
Senator Henderson, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr President. Can the minister provide a comparison of Australia's aged care response compared to the rest of the world?
Order. Order. I'll wait till there's silence, Senator Colbeck. We're wasting time. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. As I outlined to the Senate yesterday, one of the leading geriatricians in Australia's response to fight COVID-19, Associate Professor Michael Murray, said Australia was as well prepared for a significant aged care outbreak as any country or jurisdiction in the world, with the probable exception of Hong Kong.
Senator Keneally.
Mr President, we have learnt the lessons from Hong Kong, including the adoption of their model of infection control leads in each of our facilities. Globally, Mr President, the impact of COVID-19 has tragically been felt in aged care. Australia has had fewer deaths, both in total and in care homes, than many other countries in the world, including those that we know are going through a second wave of infections.
Senator Urquhart. Order.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australians, Senator Colbeck. Last night, the Morrison government tabled its formal response to the Royal Commission's special report on COVID-19. The document failed to state that 685 older Australians died from COVID-19 in the Morrison government's residential aged care system. Why?
The Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australians, Senator Colbeck.
Mr President, I quite clearly stated in my statement to the Senate yesterday afternoon that 693 Australians have died as a result of COVID-19 in respect of COVID-19. It's an absolute tragedy in every single circumstance, and I've just repeated that a moment ago myself, Mr President. The response that we tabled yesterday was to the measures that were requested by the Royal Commission, and it was our response to the Royal Commission report, Mr President. That's what we tabled yesterday. And in my statement yesterday to this chamber, I acknowledged, as I have done on many occasions—
Senator Colbeck, I've got Senator Urquhart on a point of order. Senator Urquhart.
Point of order is relevance. The minister was asked why the document failed to state that 685 older Australians had died from COVID-19. I'd like that question answered.
I've allowed you to restate the question there, Senator Urquhart. While the minister is talking about the number you referred to and the content of the report, I can't instruct him to answer a question in that form. I think he is being directly relevant to that, but I've allowed you to restate it and remind him of it. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm not interested in the political games that the Labor Party seek to play with respect to this issue. As I've said a moment ago—
Order. Senator Colbeck. Order. Senator. Order. I'll call senators on my left. Senator Wong is on her feet. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr President. Direct relevance. We asked you why your report did not include a reference to 685 Australians who died in your system. I would ask you to have the decency to respond to that.
Senator Birmingham on the point of order.
Mr President, on the point of order, Senator Colbeck has been consistently directly relevant in his response to this question. Senator Colbeck, in responding to this question, has indeed identified this was a government response to the specific recommendations of the Royal Commission. He has equally identified that in tabling that response and the statement made, the number that was referenced was cited. I fail to see how a senator could be any clearer and any more relevant, directly relevant, in responding to an answer than Senator Colbeck is being.
Order. Senator Wong, your point of order was substantively the same to Senator Urquhart's. I allowed you as leader to make the point again and to restate that concluding part of the question. Senator Colbeck, in my view, while he is talking about the report that was tabled and while he is talking about the number of Australians who have passed away due to this, I don't think I can instruct him as to how to answer a question that specifically. He is being directly relevant to the question at the moment. Senator Colbeck, to continue.
Thank you, Mr President. As I said, the report that I tabled yesterday responded directly to the recommendations of the Royal Commission's COVID-19 Special Report. In my statement that I gave in tabling that document, I directly referenced all of the 693 who have passed away as a result of COVID-19 in aged care, 685 in residential aged care, 8 in home care, and acknowledged again, as I have done on many occasions in this chamber, the individual tragedy it is for each of those families and their friends and communities. And we continue to work in the interests of all senior Australians in aged care in responding to the virus and managing its effects in the community, Mr President. This government, as I outlined a moment ago, since the outbreak of the COVID-19, has been working closely with the aged care sector to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have continued to develop our plan as that process has continued.
Senator Urquhart, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Last week the minister tabled the annual report of the Aged Care Act. Again, the report failed to state that 685 older Australians had died from COVID-19 in the Morrison government's residential aged care system. Why?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr President, that report directly referenced the impact that COVID-19 had on senior Australians, and putting a date at a point in time when that number, I'll take Senator Keneally's interjection, because the date of the report was at the 30th of June last year, and at that point in time, the number of deaths had changed. And unfortunately, Mr President, the number of deaths continued to escalate through July, August and September, through into October, when until the 28th of October we got to the fantastic circumstance where there are no cases of COVID-19 in residents in aged care in this country, because Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, Western Australia and Tasmania and the Territories have managed to control the community transmission of the virus. And when there is community transmission of COVID-19, there is a risk to residential aged care.
Order. Senator Urquhart, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Today in the Senate gallery we have nurses who have been at the front lines of this pandemic and cared for older Australians in this minister's broken aged care system. What will it take for the Morrison government to stop denying the 685 deaths on its watch, to take responsibility and to ensure that this never happens again?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. And can I completely reject the premise of the question, because at no point in time have we denied the tragic circumstances of COVID-19 in aged care. And it's quite dishonest, Senator, for you to actually frame your question in that way, Mr President. Can I say I pay tribute and give thanks to every aged care worker, not just the nurses, the personal care workers, the therapists, everybody who has worked on the front line in aged care. And thank you for being here today, Mr President. I pay tribute to everyone. And while this opposition at the last election refused to give any additional resource to staff in residential aged care, Mr President, we have on 3 occasions provided additional resources and payment to staff in residential aged care in the form of retention payments, Mr President. This government is the only one who's actually, in material terms,
has expired. Order on my left. Order. Senator Davey.
Thank you, Mr President. My question, turning from aged care to health care, is for the Minister representing the Minister for Regional Health, Senator Cash. Can the Minister please update the Senate on how the Liberals and Nationals in government are building our investment in regional and rural Australia through the 2020-21 budget to ensure that our regions have access to the most effective health care possible?
The Minister representing the Minister for Regional Health, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Davey for her question, and I acknowledge, like all of us on the government side of the chamber, her commitment to Australians who reside in rural and regional Australia, but in particular also to our commitment as a Liberal National Government to improving the health standards of those who reside in rural and regional Australia. And in fact, Mr President, in this year's budget, regional Australians will actually get benefit from improved access to health services, and that's because we have invested a $1.2 billion investment to boost healthcare in the bush. And, Mr President, this significant investment, $1.2 billion investment, it builds on the reforms that the government has already put in place to expand, as we know, rural training opportunities, but also to address the complex workforce challenges that actually occur in rural communities. Mr President, in terms of the focus of our reforms, they're focusing very much on addressing the distribution challenge, and we are now investing in new approaches and localised solutions. We understand as a government that one size does not fit all, and in particular when you look at a country that is the size of Australia. So in terms of the investment and the policies that we're putting in place, we are very much breaking new ground by investing in unique sub-regional models of primary care delivery. We're trialling different approaches to addressing the unique challenges to regional health care. Mr President, these regional models, as I've said, they move beyond the one-size-fits-all approach. And what we're looking at doing is empowering local communities with the tools to integrate the services that they already have, to increase their support in essential services, but also to find localised solutions. And in addition to that, we have a $3.3 million investment that is actually going to support the delivery of the primary care across 5 sub-regions, as Senator Davey knows,
Senator
in
Cash.
New South
Senator
Wales.
Davey, a supplementary question.
Thank you. And to support this initiative, how is the government securing better training for rural GPs, which makes rural health practice more appealing to our regional medical practitioners?
Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President. And again, the government understands that rolling out health policies that are uniform across regional Australia, it hasn't always worked. When you have a country the size of Australia, one size fits all is not always the way to go. So what we're looking at doing as a government is we're looking at drilling down into more innovative and collaborative ways of supporting our regional health workforce. And as Senator Davey would know, evidence shows that when students actually undertake their training in the regions, they are more likely to stay in the regions. And that's why, in terms of the funding that we've provided in the 2020-2021 budget, we're providing an additional $50.3 million to enhance the rural training pipeline through the long-standing Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program. Mr President, we understand that providing the funding to ensure that we can extend training into smaller rural communities and rural residential aged care facilities will assist those in rural and regional Australia.
Senator Davey, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Finally, as we emerge from this pandemic, and thankfully there hasn't been much of an outbreak in the regions, but how is the government continuing to support our regional communities and our regional health systems to remain alert to the risks of COVID-19?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, I think we all acknowledge that we all need to remain alert in relation to COVID-19. And certainly, though, whilst cases in rural and regional Australia and rural and regional communities remain relatively low, it is important that we do remain vigilant, but also be ready to respond in the event that there is transmission in any part of our regional communities. And again, in terms of the recent budget, the 2020-2021 budget, importantly, it continues to fund the government's COVID-19 health response to manage the impact of the pandemic in rural Australia. Mr President, in terms of some of the policies that we have implemented, we've fast-tracked, as you know, the expansion of temporary MBS telehealth items, including for rural and remote Australians. And in fact, Senator Davey would be pleased to know that there have now been over 10 million telehealth services delivered to more than 3.2 million people in regional Australia. And that is why
Senator Cash. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister Perin. Yesterday it was announced that the former Liberal Premier of Tasmania, Will Hodgman, would be Australia's next High Commissioner for Singapore. Mr Hodgman replaces Bruce Gosper, the former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Mr Gosper replaced Philip Green, the First Assistant Secretary in DFAT's International Security Division. Mr Green replaced Doug Chester, Deputy Secretary of Defence, Foreign Affairs and Trade, and Mr Chester replaced Morris Cooper, the former Deputy Secretary of DFAT. Mr Cooper replaced Gary Quinlan, the former Deputy Secretary of DFAT. And Mr Quinlan replaced Murray McLean, former Deputy Secretary of DFAT. So I'd like to know, Minister, did you run out of DFAT Deputy Secretaries, or is the Liberal Party just a deeper talent pool these days?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I am very pleased to acknowledge the strong service of former High Commissioners for Singapore that Senator Lambie has been kind enough to read into the Hansard record. In fact, if I may say particularly, Mr President, if I may acknowledge Mr Bruce Gosper, the incumbent High Commissioner in Singapore. He and his team have been doing an exceptional job in the context of the COVID-19 challenge in particular, including supporting my most recent visit to Singapore, which is one of the very few international visits that we have been able to make as a government in the context of COVID-19. I would say, Mr President, in response to Senator Lambie's question, which notwithstanding her humour, I will assume goes to the appointment of the former Premier of Tasmania, Mr Will Hodgman, that Mr Hodgman is a highly qualified, very appropriate appointment to be Australia's High Commissioner in Singapore, one of our most important regional partners, key member of ASEAN, a country with whom we have a very important strategic partnership, Senator, a digital engagement that is one of the most significant that Australia has undertaken in recent years. And what former Premier Hodgman, and old habits die hard, I still call Arthur Sinodina Senator, what former Premier Hodgman will bring to this role is a view of Australia as a key partner in the Indo-Pacific, particularly in ASEAN and particularly with Singapore. He is well known for putting Tasmania, in particular, on the world stage, putting Australia first in everything that he has done, and he is eminently well qualified. I look forward to working with him into the future as he leads Australia's representation in Singapore. It will be welcomed by Prime Minister Lee, and it will be welcomed by Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. It is a recognition of
Senator
the
Payne,
important
time for the
relationship we
answer
have with
has
Singapore.
expired. Senator Lambie, a supplementary question. Order. Senator Lambie, I'll wait till I can hear your question. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm glad you mentioned that Will Hodgman was highly qualified. So, if you're so highly qualified, what was the selection process you followed for his appointment?
Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And Senator Lambie, the government has a range of
Order. Order. Order on my left. I'm going to ask people to take a breath after I call for order before they start being disorderly again. Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Let me say that Mr Hodgman has extensive experience across key sectors of importance to the Australia-Singapore relationship, particularly trade and tourism. He will be an outstanding advocate of Australia's interests in Singapore and an outstanding advocate for our engagement through Singapore and with ASEAN in particular. He will complement the extensive work done by the incumbent, Mr Gosper, who, as I said, has been a fine High Commissioner in Singapore and continues to be so. It is important to note that Mr Gosper does not include his term until January of next year. When our ambassadors and our High Commissioners—
Senator Payne, Senator Lambie on a point of order.
Sorry, Mr President, I'm just wondering, I did ask what the selection process was. I haven't quite got to that yet.
You reminded the minister of the question. She has, well, I thought 4 seconds, 8 seconds according to the clerk. Senator Payne, have you concluded your answer, or you'd like to? Yes, Senator Lambie, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Besides being a job for a mate, what professional personal relationship does Mr Hodgman have with Singapore that could possibly qualify him for this role?
Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think it is important for Senator Lambie and for those opposite, it would seem, from the cacophony opposite, to really appreciate the importance that we place on growing our relationship in priority areas, continuing our nations, Australia's and Singapore's work together in responding to particularly the health and the economic challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr Hodgman's extensive experience in government, his extensive experience in trade and in tourism, which are key aspects of our relationship.
Payne, I have Senator Lambie on a point of order.
Mr. President, I'm simply asking what professional personal relationship did Mr Hodgman have with Singapore that could possibly qualify him? I just want to know what professional personal relationships he had to qualify
Senator
him for
Lambie,
that.
I think, with respect, order. Senator Payne is being directly relevant. She's answering the question, if not necessarily in the form requested. She is being directly relevant to the question. Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have spoken to Mr Hodgman's particular expertise as an outstanding leader of government in Australia, an outstanding leader of government who really moved Tasmania into a place on not just the Australian stage but the world stage in trade and tourism terms, which those opposite may wish to decry and which Senator Lambie may not accept, but which this government, Mr. President, sees as—
Senator Payne, time for the answer has expired. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston. Can the Minister confirm that as early as the 8th of March 2017, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal held that no debt could be founded on the basis of a robo-debt letter?
The Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston.
No, I can't.
Senator O'Neill, a supplementary question.
Will the Minister commit to taking that question on notice and providing us with an answer?
Is that the I can't instruct the Minister. You've got no. Well, Senator O'Neill, the Minister's concluded her answer. You have an opportunity now to ask a supplementary question. Senator O'Neill.
Can the Minister confirm that, in addition to the decision handed down on the 8th of March 2017, the AAT held that the robo-debt scheme was illegal on a further 75 occasions?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As I have said on a number of occasions in this place, the AAT plays a very important role in making decisions and providing independent merits review to a wide range of different decisions. But in doing so, I would note that each case is unique and turns on its own facts and circumstances. And in the situation, there have been decisions of the AAT that have upheld the debt decisions calculated using income averaging, and equally there have been those that have not. And what I would say is that you cannot unilaterally come in here and make a determination on the basis of a specific case and make a general assumption that the decisions that are made on particular cases, and as I said, some of the cases before the AAT, some of the unique and individual cases before the AAT have been found not to have been upheld, and others have been upheld.
Senator O'Neill, a final supplementary question.
Hasn't the Morrison government known for years that the robo-debt scheme was illegal?
Yes. Senator Ruston.
No.
Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the development of the Greenvale training area is boosting jobs in North Queensland and helping to build a stronger and more secure Australia?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank Senator McDonald for that question. The Morrison government is resolutely committed to supporting Australian jobs and boosting the economy during COVID-19, and I'm so proud that Defence is significantly contributing to this economic recovery. Since the beginning of COVID-19, we've been working with Australian industry to progress defence projects to both deliver essential defence capability and also to provide much-needed cash flow throughout our economy. And I'm pleased to announce to the Senate that we are proceeding with all of the scheduled work under the $2.25 billion Australian-Singapore Military Training Initiative. Last month, I was delighted to announce that the Australian company, CPB Contractors, have been awarded a contract for works on the new defence training area in North Queensland. This $800 million investment near Greenvale will create long-term local jobs and support local industry in North Queensland. The construction workforce is expected to peak at 350, with 90% of the workers drawn from the local area. This advanced new training area will provide significant long-term local economic opportunities for North Queensland and particularly Townsville. When the Australia-Singapore Military Training Initiative reaches maturity, up to 14,000 Singapore Armed Forces personnel will train in Queensland for 18 weeks a year. This will provide enduring economic and social benefits to Queensland for at least the next 25 years.
Senator McDonald, a supplementary question.
Can the minister advise the Senate of the economic and local industry benefits the Australia-Singapore Military Training Initiative will deliver in central Queensland?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr President. In addition to Greenvale, the Morrison government is further investing in the Shoalwater Bay training area in central Queensland. Together, both of these investments in North and Central Queensland coincide very happily with the 30th anniversary of Singapore Armed Forces training right here in Australia. This $2.25 billion Australian-Singapore Military Training Initiative will meet the future needs of both our own Australian Defence Forces and also the Singapore Armed Forces. And as part of this initiative, we're investing $800 million into the Central Queensland Capricorn region. The Shoalwater Bay investment will support 47 local companies and 450 workers at the peak of construction. This is further evidence that Queenslanders can trust the Morrison government to bolster regional growth and also to support local jobs.
Senator McDonald, a final supplementary question.
How does the development of this training area benefit the ADF and our key bilateral relationships with Singapore?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you again, Mr President. Singapore is a highly capable and very, very close defence partner of Australia, with a shared commitment to regional security and also to stability. In October, I made my second official visit to Singapore, where I met with the Prime Minister Lee, and also my defence counterpart, Dr Ng. It was very, very clear to me during this visit how much Singapore values its deep engagement with Australia, particularly so this year in our 30th anniversary of Singaporean training here in Australia. And they appreciate this relationship just as much as Australia does. As close and enduring defence partners, these training areas support our interoperability right across the Indo-Pacific, and it also ensures Singapore's ability to generate a force that provides strategic weight in the region. As Australian-owned and managed training areas, they also support a more capable
Senator
and
Reynolds,
agile
time
ADF.
for the answer has expired. Senator Whish-Wilson.
Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Birmingham, representing the Prime Minister. Minister, the Australian public, indeed the world, has been shocked by allegations of war crimes, criminality and human rights violations committed by Australian Special Forces in Afghanistan. And can I take this opportunity to acknowledge the Defence Force personnel in here, that I'm sure few people have been more shocked than them at these allegations. Does the minister agree that the Australian community has a right to know about such things? Does the minister agree that the victims of these alleged crimes have a right to the truth being told? In short, does the minister agree that these allegations being made public is a good thing?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator Whish-Wilson for his question, and let me too acknowledge the serving men and women of our Australian Defence Forces who are in the gallery today, and say to all of you, thank you for your service, and thank you indeed for the contribution you make to our nation. And I extend that around this chamber to the various colleagues who are veterans of the Australian Defence Forces, and thank all of them, as I do any of those listening for their service and contribution. And in doing so, it is crucially important when we discuss matters of the IGADF report that first and foremost we acknowledge the vast and overwhelming majority of the men and women who have served Australia's Defence Forces with distinction and with honour. And in doing so, we say to all of them that you should be proud of your service and that we are proud of you and what you have contributed. And part of the pride that Australians should take in the way we conduct ourselves as a nation and our Defence Forces operate is that we hold ourselves to a high standard. We hold ourselves to a high standard as a country and to all those who go out under the flag of our country and serve under that flag. That we expect, in doing so, they operate with the type of distinction that the vast, vast majority have done so. But in holding ourselves to that high standard, we also apply a degree of accountability and transparency that is unmatched by many other nations of the world and unrivalled by many others.
Order. Senator Whish-Wilson.
Elements. I asked whether the minister, in 3 different ways, agrees that the disclosure of these reports is a good thing and in the public interest.
Senator Whish-Wilson, it was a question, multiple questions with a substantial preamble. I've said before that no, the preamble is part of the question, Senator Whish-Wilson. I've mentioned before that where people seek very specific answers, very short specific questions, constrain what is directly relevant. In this case, the minister is being directly relevant. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. And as I was just saying, as a country that holds ourselves to such high standards, there comes with that an element of transparency and accountability. And indeed, that is what the IGADF inquiry report has undertaken. It has ensured the measure of accountability is in place and it has been transparent through the release of the findings in the summary report of the IGADF.
Order. Senator Whish-Wilson, a supplementary question.
Thank you, President. The Brereton report made strong recommendations about protecting whistleblowers in bringing information on war crimes to light. Indeed, it recommended not only protecting them, but also promoting them. David McBride is the only whistleblower facing criminal charges and a potential lengthy jail sentence in relation to these disclosures that the Australian public now have. Minister, will your government rule out the prosecution of Army lawyer and whistleblower David McBride?
Senator Whish-Wilson. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. And the government is indeed grateful for the cooperation of many in relation to the conduct of this inquiry, and we have responded in relation to this inquiry by establishing the Office of the Special Investigator to handle matters that relate to potential criminal conduct and to investigate those and to ensure that proper judicial processes, including presumption of innocence, are followed quite appropriately. We have equally put in place an implementation oversight panel to review Defence's response to the recommendations into the report, to ensure that in doing so there is, again, appropriate accountability to the leaders of the Australian Defence Force as they respond to this report.
Senator Whish-Wilson, on a point of order.
Point of relevance, President. Will you rule out prosecuting whistleblower David McBride, Minister?
Again, that was the conclusion of your question. The preamble forms part of the question, and a minister can be directly relevant addressing part of a question. Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, I am not in this chamber going to make decisions from a political pulpit that are rightly the matters of proper legal processes.
Senator Whish-Wilson, a final supplementary question.
So I'll take that as a no, Minister. Along with David McBride, your government has aggressively pursued lawyer Bernard Collaery and witness Kay and has demonstrated a chilling complicity in the extradition trial and political witch hunt of Walkley Award-winning Australian journalist Julian Assange. Minister, why is your government waging a war against whistleblowers and transparency?
Order. Now, Senator Whish-Wilson, I have sought some advice from the clerk. The substantive question at the commencement was about another matter. The second supplementary needs to be relevant to the substantive question, not just the second question. So I'm going to allow the minister to address assertions made because I don't want to have a situation where questions can be asked and then ministers not have the opportunity to address them, even though questions might be ruled out of order. But I encourage people to make sure both their follow-ups are within the standing orders with respect to the substantive question. Senator Birmingham. Or Senator Whish-Wilson.
Point of order. I'm happy to talk to you about this afterwards. Are you actually ruling my question out of order?
No. My practice on this form, Senator Whish-Wilson, I'm happy to speak to you afterwards. My practice on this is that I am reluctant to rule questions out of order so that ministers don't have a chance to respond, because, quite frankly, I don't want to create an incentive for misbehaviour in questions that then cannot be addressed in the chamber by assertions being made and then preventing ministers respond to them. So I'm urging all senators, and in this case Senator Whish-Wilson, saying this question I think could be ruled out of order, but I'm allowing the minister to respond to it. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, I will make 3 observations in response to Senator Whish-Wilson's attempted supplementary question. Number 1 is that I will not, on such a sensitive issue, seek to politicise it in any way, unlike the Australian Greens. Number 2 is that I will not, as a politician or a minister, seek to overturn what are appropriately the decisions of the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecution or those in whom such authority to make legal determinations is vested. And number 3, I would note again, Mr President, that our country has held itself to a standard of accountability and transparency on this highly sensitive matter, the likes of which I struggle to think of any other nation holding itself to.
Senator Birmingham. Senator Pratt.
Aged care and senior Australians. Senator Colbeck. In August, the minister promised that he was requiring residential aged care facilities to, and I quote, have a designated infection control officer on site. In the government's response to the Royal Commission's special report on COVID-19, it's revealed the practitioners the minister promised in August will only be in place today. Why has it taken 3 months for the minister to deliver this protection for older Australians in aged care and support aged care workers?
Minister for Aged Care and Senior Australians, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Senator Pratt is correct. On the 31st of August, we announced that we would require all aged care providers in this country to have a nominated IPC lead within each facility, Mr President. And just because we say it doesn't mean it magically happens. We had to give the sector the time for it to occur. And so, Mr President, I wrote to all aged care providers, Mr President, I wrote to every aged care provider in this country and told them that they were required to nominate their infection control lead by the 1st of December, Mr President, and that's what I expected they will have done, Mr President. So we, in fact, moved ahead of the Royal Commission on this particular issue by announcing at the end of August that we would require every aged care facility in this country to nominate an infection control lead. We gave them a reasonable period of time for them to get that position in place. And we have, Mr President, given them a further period of time to ensure that this nominated staff member has the appropriate level of qualification, Mr President, and we've actually nominated the qualifications that they will be required to have by a certain date, Mr President. So we have actually done exactly what we said we would do in August. We said to the sector we would be requiring them to nominate the lead. Mr President, we have made it a condition of their accreditation, so they are required to do it, Mr President. And so we've done exactly everything that we said we would do, and we gave the sector an appropriate period of time to get that position in place.
Senator Pratt, supplementary question.
Can the minister guarantee that as of today, the 1st of December, every residential aged care facility has appointed an infection prevention and control clinical lead?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr President, as I've just advised the chamber, Mr President, I have made that appointment a condition of accreditation, Mr President. So as each residential aged care facility is checked for its accreditation, and we are conducting checks on infection control on aged care facilities all over the country. We have been doing that for a period of time, and we will continue to do that, because this is not just a set-and-forget process. It's a continuous improvement process that we've asked the providers to put in place. So this will be and is a requirement, Mr President, of their accreditation. So that fact will be checked as a part of that process.
Senator Pratt, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Given the minister's management of the Morrison government's broken aged care system, which continues to be characterised by dawdle and delay, isn't it clear that this minister has learned nothing from the tragedy he's overseen, the almost 700 deaths in aged care from COVID-19 and the censure of the Senate?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. And unfortunately, the senator suffers from not having listened to the previous answers in asking the second supplementary, Mr President.
Order.
Because I have directly addressed every single issue that Senator Pratt has raised. We've done exactly what we said we would do in the time that we said, and we've in fact made the appointment of the infection control professionals a factor of accreditation of aged care to ensure that we continue to improve the system and keep our senior Australians safe, Mr President.
Senator Birmingham.
I will now ask that further questions be placed on notice.
See you in half an hour.